Committee on the medium-term debt management strategy for financial year 2006 to 27 and financial year 2028-29. In seconding this report, allow me to briefly underscore the key considerations that informed the committee's review. Honorable Speaker, first on the macroeconomic and growth outlook, the strategy is anchored on assumptions of average real GDP growth of 5.3% over the medium term, supported by continued activity in agriculture, construction, industry, and services. However, the committee observed that this growth path remains modest relative to Kenya's long-term development ambitions and may not be sufficiently transformative to materially improve debt carrying capacity. In particular, the economy has remained around 5% growth range for some time, while the structural aspirations under Vision 2030 is a target of 10%. And to move the country towards a newly industrializing middle-income economy supported by higher and more broad-based growth, the committee view is that the strategy should now be supported by stronger structural reforms aimed at improving productivity, competitiveness, exports, and private sector activity so that Kenya can gradually rise its growth potentially and strengthen its debt carrying capacity over time. Second, on fiscal policy, the committee observed that the strategy is being implemented in a constrained but manageable fiscal environment. Revenues are projected to improve over the medium term, although they are still expected to average about 17% of GDP, while expenditures remain elevated at 21.5% of GDP. This means that the fiscal deficit will remain a key feature on the medium-term framework, and borrowing will continue to play an important role in financing government operations. Even so, the committee is encouraged that the framework provides an opportunity for the National Treasury to deepen fiscal consolidation efforts through stronger revenue mobilization, expenditure rationalization, and better alignment to borrowing to productive priorities. Third, on debt strategy itself, the committee appreciates that the MTDS provides a deliberate and structured approach to managing the cost and risk of the public debt portfolio. The proposed financing mix under the domestic borrowing will account for 82% of gross financing and 78% of net financing, while external borrowing will account for 18% and 22% respectively, reflects an effort to respond to prevailing market realities while reducing exposure to external shocks. The committee considers this approach understandable within the present financing environment. However, it proposes that the implementation of this strategy be accompanied by continued efforts to deepen the domestic debt market, broaden the investor base, and carefully calibrate following levels so as to preserve macroeconomic stability. And the last one, on the main risk of the debt outlook, the committee observed that the medium-term debt path remains exposed to refinancing pressures, elevated debt service obligations, continued reliance on domestic borrowing, and the growing role of commercial external borrowing. There are also broader physical risks associated with contingent liabilities, PPP, securitization, and other alternative financing mechanisms. However, the committee takes the view that these risks can be better managed through improved reporting, stronger physical risk disclosure, more active liability management, and closer integration of all public liabilities into the physical framework. In that regard, the report before the House proposes practical recommendations intended to strengthen transparency, accountability, and long-term debt sustainability. Honorable Speaker, The committee is convinced that withstanding the challenges currently facing the debt environment, the proposed MTDS provides a credible framework for strengthening public debt management over the medium term. I concur with the chairperson and the committee that what the country now requires is disciplined policy implementation, greater efficiency in utilization of public resources, and stronger fiscal consolidation anchored on supporting growth and industrialization. Through these measures, Kenya can progressively reduce debt vulnerabilities and place the public debt trajectory on a firmer and more sustainable path. For these reasons, and in support of recommendations contained in the report, I beg to second. Thank you.
Honourable members, I now propose the question that this House adopts the report of the public debt. I propose the question that this House adopts the report of the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on its consideration of the medium-term debt management strategy for the financial year 2026, 2027 to 2029, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, the 25th of February, the year 2026, and pursuant to the provisions of sections 15(4) of the Public Finance Management Act of 2012 and Standing Order number 232A, 7 and 8. A, approves the medium-term debt management strategy for the financial years 2026, 2027, and 2028-2029, and B, makes the policy and financial resolutions contained in the schedule to the order paper.
Wilberforce Oundo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Let me also stand here to support the report by the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on the medium-term debt strategy, management strategy for the financial years 2026-2027 to 2028-2029. Honorable Speaker, the strategy, the medium debt strategy, provides that the domestic borrowing will account for 82%, external borrowing will account for 18%. And this debt mix, in their own report, the intention is to minimize exposure to exchange rate and external rollover risks, and also to leverage local market depth and enhance the productivity of the funding. Honorable Speaker, the report, in its own report, clearly indicates matters we have been talking about in the public forum that have actually been confirmed by this report presented to us here, Honorable Speaker. The first thing and important thing, Honorable Speaker, is that according to Central Bank of Kenya, the national debt, Honorable Speaker, has grown from approximately 9 trillion in 2022 to approximately 12.25 trillion by the end of 2025. That, Honorable Speaker, is about 3.5 trillion in 3 years. In simple terms, we are saying the country has been borrowing on average 1.1 trillion each financial year. Honorable Speaker, this again brings back to the obvious question we ask. When the current regime was campaigning, it campaigned on the theme or on the promise that they will not borrow. That borrowing was bad, borrowing by the previous regime, which the current president was part and parcel of that regime, was a bad economic policy, yet have continued to borrow unabatedly. Honorable Speaker, the second issue that comes out very clear, and many people have talked about it, the issue of odious debt. Honorable Speaker, out of the 3.5 trillion borrowed from 2022 to 2025, and this was picked out by the memorandum presented by various members, we are unable to clearly indicate how that money has been used. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, this report brings out the dire situation, structural situation this economy finds itself in. We have been told all over the press, in political rallies, on top of car rooftops, on podiums, that the economy is stable and the economy is doing well. Honorable Speaker, in their own admission that the continued underdevelopment or the continued reduction on development vote from below even the 30% provided from the PFM is restricting the growth of this economy. It's actually restricting the growth of local generated revenue. And then they keep on telling us, we are doing well. We are not doing well. Honorable Speaker, we are again out of this, told that at this rate, the way where we stand, any change, be it a local change, a local shock, an external shock, will put Kenya at a peril of debt default. Because we are almost at the choking point. Yet why we're borrowing money, what we are doing with it cannot be seen. Thirdly, Honorable Speaker, and this we have talked about, securitization and whatever arrangement we have. It's true, Honorable Speaker, and it's important the committee must be alive to it. This is debt. And because of this, we are choking the ability of this country to borrow any further. Because we are committing revenue that does not exist now, we are prospecting, we are proposing, yet that revenue is not now. That revenue alone is constricting. Finally, Honorable Speaker, truth be told, the PFM Act says 55% of the GDP, debt to GDP. We are at almost 68, and in their own admission, will not be in a position to meet that report, that status by 2028. Are we truly telling the Kenyans the truth, or we are just lying to them to make them happy? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Tindi Mwale. Tindi Mwale. Okay, Mboko Milemba. You are yet to get where? The Honorable Kenya Doku.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to give my comments on medium-term debt strategy as presented by the National Treasury and our report therein. I am a member of a debt committee. And Mr. Speaker, from the foregoing, I want to support our report. Debt is becoming quite a thorn and a topic in this country. But politics aside, we need to look at where we are as a country and what we need to do going forward. Mr. Speaker, in the year 2023, we did amend PFM Act and came up with Section 50. Actually, amendment was on Section 50, whereby we stated that by the year 2028, we must be at 55% plus or minus 5 in terms of debt to GDP in present value. And Mr. Speaker, progressively I've been monitoring to see where we are, because I am so passionate about debt being the topic that has refused to die from our media and from the mouth of every Kenyan who cares to see how the economy is performing. And Mr. Speaker, as we were engaging the National Treasury, we asked for projection as to see whether by the year 2028, we're actually going to be at where we envisaged when we set the law, Section 50, to make sure that we are at 55% plus or minus 5 debt to GDP in present value. And sadly to state here, the National Treasury stated that the best that they can do by the year 2029, not even 2028, will be at 62%. And therefore, indeed, if you're not going to relook into our law, then it means that they're going to be in breach because they will not hit the 60% and below as was envisaged when we passed PFM Act, Section 50. Mr. Speaker, something else that should worry us and maybe look at and to what it is that we're doing just to make sure that the fears that we have are allayed is the issue of the interest rate, the interest amount that we're paying every financial year from our revenues. You can imagine out of our revenues, 41% is going to pay to the repayment of interest only without even mention of the principal amount. That is quite worrying, and something must be done if really we are a serious country that is desirous of doing away with or reducing the debt burden. Mr. Speaker, the next issue that I looked into when I was interrogating the MTDA that was presented to us by the National Treasury is the borrowing mix. Previously, we have passed MTDSs in this assembly, but by the end of financial year, there is no fidelity to the resolutions that we've passed in this House. We passed borrowing mix of 55 to 45 domestic and to external borrowing. Any mix that we pass here, we do not live to see the implementation of the same. We may give an allowance or give and take of about 5% or thereabout, but the variance is quite worrying. And Mr. Speaker, we are now presented here with a debt mix of 82 to 18, which means 68 to 22. It's 78 to 22 years, so that we get 100%. And Mr. Speaker, that is to say we are going to borrow domestically or locally 68 shillings for every 100 that we borrow. 68 shillings are going to come from domestic market. That is to say we are going to mop up all the monies that are within our republic. You know, we have to borrow that money and compete with private sector. And I got worried and asked the National Treasury, what is it that you're going to do to make sure that interest rates do not shoot? If at all we're going to be, if our market is going to be demand and supply, controlled. And Mr. Speaker, as they responded, they said that the government through CBR, through the enforcement of CBR, they're going to make sure that the interest rates are within the favorable reach. Well, that is for us to see, but there's something to worry us as a country. We must not do and assume that it's business as...
Give him an additional 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that magnanimity. Now, we must be alive to the fact that...
Point of order. What's your point of order,
Thank you very much. Honorable Speaker, I've been listening to my brother, Honorable Kwenya, and there are statements that needs to be substantiated. That the National Treasury actually appeared before the committee of this House and purported to say that one of the debt management tool will be the lowering of the CBR rate. The Central Bank of Kenya and the CBR and the Monetary Policy Committee should actually act independently from what the Treasury and the fiscal policy is.
Order. Are you talking from a point of knowledge of information or the practice? If it is a practice, we're not that qualified for that. But if you are actually saying that he's misleading the House, then that this was not discussed.
Honorable Speaker, that is too weighty a matter that needs to be substantiated.
Order. Do you have information as to exactly what has transpired within that framework of discussion? If you don't have information and you're not saying that Honorable Kwenya is misleading, then you can give your point of argument at the appropriate time. You're looking at the practice, not the actual incidents that happened. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for ruling my brother out of order, so then I don't have to respond. But fairly speaking, is that it is the mandate of central bank just to make sure that banks do not act at will, charging interest rates as they would wish. There is the minimum that is set by the central bank, and this is what I'm talking about. And indeed, even with this kind of borrowing that has been happening in the country, it is interesting that the interest rates have remained low. If that is sustained, then borrowing domestically is okay, because that interest will again go to the pockets of Kenyans, as opposed to whereby we pay interest that goes out of the country to benefit the institutions that we borrow from. I rest my case and I support the report.
Omboko Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I thought we were speaking for 10 minutes. I realized it's much shorter. Honorable Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to speak on this particular one on debt strategy as moved by the chair of the debt committee. The Honorable Speaker, when we talk about debt in this country, it's a topic that now is very, very sensitive and it's a concern of every person. But formally, this was not the case. And therefore, I also want to thank this House that over and over the years, and specifically the 13th Parliament, it has introduced the Committee on Debt, and which is actually helping us to oversight everything around debt and the debt management strategy in the medium term. But Kenyans are very concerned about debt. In the period up to the end of the reign of President Kenyatta, nobody really got concerned about this, and debt was welcomed. That particular time would also get grants. Grants currently are not really forthcoming, and if you were to go into the history to see where Jomo left the debt at, it's very, very marginal and very minimal. But even when Moi took over from Jomo, and when he left leadership, the place where President Moi left the debt was still very, very low. And when you look at the figures, because they are all over within the public sector and on any other platforms that have highlighted debt, you'll still find that it was just in the tune of about 3 to 4 billion. When you look at the reign of Mwai Kibaki, the economist, he still handled debt in such a way that it never went to spiral very high up. In fact, it's only during the reign of Uhuru that then the debt spills and becomes almost double the figures. You can check that on Google, because I've severally done this, Honorable Speaker. And then the debt becomes more than even triple, and then we get to where we are. So by the time then William Ruto, as the Excellency President, comes in, the debt is already in an unmanageable situation. And that is where we are, and it's very important Kenyans look at that. So it's very important that this committee did this work, and there are a few points which we need to highlight, which I think was good work from them. Number one was the issue of the amount of money we always plan for or budget for development expenditure. Somewhat, it seems, we only strive to protect the 30% of the budget. And I've never strived. Of course, I know the budget has a lot of constraints, which do arise because of the many demands that are required in the country, which are not necessarily development-based. But we need to make sure that for this economy to grow beyond 5% or 6% minimal digit, which we always realize every year and we boast of. If we are not boasting of 4.9, we are boasting about 9 or about 6. That's the highest we may go to. We really need to invest more in when we are budgeting here as Parliament, we make sure that this 30% minimal threshold is overtaken so that we can budget more for development. The committee points out something that is very exciting, and I think this is very good as Parliament, because they speak on the monies that do come from A&A, and also the monies that are headed to securitization and things around that particular space. Honorable Speaker, it's true that concessional borrowing is dying out. And it's not very easy for countries, and Kenya in particular now, to get concessional borrowing is not easy. And therefore, we have run for commercial borrowing. But even the commercial space is also not very easy. And we are being forced every year to roll over loans from one year to another. Like currently, that's exactly what the Treasury must be doing. But the committee is advising that we need to know that all these other forms of monies that we receive in form of PPPs, in form of securitization, they are actually loans. And this House needs to have a firm control over how they come, the percentages that are put on them, and how they are used in different spaces. So, Honorable Speaker, I think that was very great from the committee, because all those monies finally will lump.
Give him half a minute more to finish.
Will actually lump out the grand totals of the debt stock, and indeed that will affect the general or running of the country. Honorable Speaker, there was so much to speak on, but I think we should have given this type of very academic economics, finance topic about 10 minutes for every speaker, so that we are heard properly. Thank you, and I support.
Honorable Elachi Beatrice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to support the report, but also to try and see if indeed as a country we can agree with what the committee is saying, but also look at our own macro context and ask ourselves whether we are on the right direction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we do not tighten our global liquidity, then as a country, we are going to still have all these challenges we are talking about. And you realize, when we started borrowing, at that time, we agreed we are borrowing, Mr. Speaker, to look at the big projects that we would want to do in the country. I think the challenge has been, while we do the big projects, and they did not start with our president today, we must accept that those who started, by the time, Mr. Speaker, we were also even going just for the different resources that we went out of the country, there was somewhere we went wrong. And it cannot be that even at this time we can come and blame His Excellency the President to solve that problem. What we should be asking ourselves is, while we went even for Eurobond and all these infrastructure bonds that we've looked for and gotten into the debt we are in, what have we done that we can stand as a country and say, this we did and it has supported the country? I know we will say we have roads, we have all of these things, Mr. Speaker, but that is one thing we must look at. Tightening our global liquidity. Remember those who took Eurobond that time, Mr. Speaker, they ended up even having their own interests put on top. And so they've made a lot of interest in it, but leaving the country in a lot of challenges. The second thing we have to ask ourselves, Mr. Speaker, is the exchange rate volatility. You find that you've gone to borrow, you borrowed at that time, but you borrowed at a very high exchange rate. And we have not even used the resources, Mr. Speaker. We've not even taken the money, but you've reached a point you're supposed to pay the debt, but you have not spent even that debt. And so how do we now make sure that we support government to ensure some of these debts that we have and we've not spent, we've not even taken the monies, but you find that the time frame, Mr. Speaker, of about to pay is about to arrive. We need, and I'm hoping Treasury is working on that. As much as I read within the report, they must work and ensure some of these debts can be cancelled and see whether we go into the much lower debts that you will be able to repay and to service. Mr. Speaker, the other thing we need to ask ourselves is the domestic versus external debt ratio. I think this is something now that we have to go back and ask ourselves whether that works. Whether we want to continue with external or we can go within domestic and see which one is more liable for our country and also to citizens who are the ones who are paying these debts. Mr. Speaker, when I look at all that we are in today, the key risks and indicators of all that we are going to go through is the debt service and revenue ratio. So you realize we are looking for revenue to pay the debt. But the ratio is so low that Kenyans are really trying with the revenue that they have, But I know we are not able to pay all these debts. So can we now go down and ask ourselves, how do we ensure we continue with these large infrastructures that we have, but follow, and maybe even the different infrastructure funds that are coming up? Are they going to help us now to reduce the debts that we have? You realize we are about to get into, I think, 26, 27, 27, 28, Mr. Speaker, as I finalize, we shall find ourselves again, very soon, being told we have to pay the remaining amounts that were for Eurobond. Mr. Speaker, as I finalize, I just want to say, as a country, even as we do all this, let us remember the past is so limit, Mr. Speaker. I beg to support.
The Honorable MP for Nairobi, Women Rep.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I rise to support the adoption of the report of the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on the medium-term debt management strategy for the financial years 2026, 27, 28, 29. I commend the committee for their thorough examination of the strategy and for the clear policy and financial resolutions contained in the schedule before this House. Honourable Speaker, debt in itself is not the enemy. In discipline, debt is. The report outlines a fiscal consolidation path, reducing the deficit from 5.3 to 3.3 of GDP over the medium term, and proposes borrowing mix of 22% external and 78% domestic borrowing that signals seriousness and discipline. But as we adopt this report, we must be clear. We must reduce the deficit, but not at the expense of growth. We must balance our books without shrinking our economy. If we tighten fiscal without protecting development expenditure, which the committee correctly emphasizes, we risk slowing the very growth that will help us repay this debt. I strongly support the recommendations that the development spending must remain above the statutory minimum threshold, because the only sustainable debt is strategy in growth. Honourable Speaker, this report rightly calls for transparency in securitization, private-public partnerships, and alternative financing mechanism. That is critical. If it creates fiscal risks, Parliament must see it. Hidden liabilities undermine public trust. Debt is intergenerational. It is about whether our children will inherit opportunity or obligation. When we look at the President's focus on infrastructure, power stations, dams, affordable housing, sporting facilities, schools, hospitals, smart agriculture, we see borrowing directed towards productive assets. Housing in particular deserves careful reflection. The housing levy was introduced as a structural funding mechanism for affordable housing. That reform was bold and necessary. However, demand far exceeds what the levy alone can sustain. As we implement this strategy, we must ask, can we optimize existing mechanisms like the levy before increasing borrowing? Can we strengthen PPPs and private capital participation to reduce pressure on public debt? If we can inject more into housing delivery without increasing debt exposure, then we enhance fiscal prudence while accelerating social impact. Because housing is not just about houses. It's a stimulus. It creates jobs, it strengthens SMEs, it builds household assets, and it expands our tax base. If debt builds power stations, it drives manufacturing. If debt builds dams, it strengthens food security. If debt builds housing, it creates jobs and dignity. If debt builds schools and hospitals, it strengthens human capital. This is what strategic borrowing is all about. Let us therefore adopt this report with clarity. Borrow for productivity, not consumption. Disclose all fiscal risks. Optimize internal financing before expanding debt. If we do that, Our children will not only inherit obligation, but they will also inherit opportunity. I support the report, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Raso Dida. Dido.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support the report by the committee. Listening to them, I think the famous saying, as far as debt is concerned, is to cut your cloth according to your size. We all know in this house that debt is necessary for countries to grow, even at the individual level. You must borrow sometimes to make ends meet. Mr. Speaker, what I expected the committee to lay out is what are the positive macroeconomic indicators to give us the futuristic. What is the future? How does the future look like as far as the Kenyan economy is concerned? We are not safe from vagaries of international financial systems and problems that occur many, many miles in Europe, in America. Of course, they will affect us because our economy is not insulated from the rest of the world. Mr. Speaker, the revenue of 17%, if indeed they are true to what they have presented, it has been there for quite some time. And for us to grow this economy, that revenue must rise to 17, 18, 20, 22%, so that you can comfortably say, yes, I have enough money for development. I can be very comfortable to say that I can pay all my workers. Or what is ongoing as far as project is concerned, that will be able to pay, that liquidity is there. In the absence of that, then we'll be struggling. Honorable Speaker, for us to meet this debt strategy as outlined by the committee, this economy must grow every day. We cannot run away to say that, as Honorable Undo there said, that we are borrowing too much. We can never be borrowing too much if we are not borrowing for recurrent expenditure. If we are borrowing for development, then it means we are borrowing to do the right things. That is the right thing to do in economics. Honorable Speaker, expenditure at 52%, recurrent versus development. Here, what Honorable Passaris there is saying, what are other alternative funding mechanisms? Do we have enough FDI? Is the Kenyan economy robust, lucrative enough to attract foreign direct investment? These are some of the things we must look at. Debt servicing at 41%. If basically we are borrowing to pay off debt, then it means we are not moving. But if we are borrowing, at the same time we are able to pay, developing, and then we have enough liquidity in the marketplace, then at least that in economics, that is progress. Honorable Speaker, one thing that is important that the committee has told us is the issue of PPP. That is where the world is moving. You allow the private sector to do development, to build roads, to put toll stations, to put up buildings, to lease offices, as opposed to the government doing that. so that the government is not forced to borrow to do those things. Selling of non-performing entities, like what has been done with the Kenya oil refineries. That is a capital.
Give him an additional 1 minute.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. That is a capital sitting idle there. We will hear maybe in few weeks how much the taxpayer has been able to collect from that. That will save this country, the taxpayer, and all of us a lot of money as opposed to borrowing. What are the incentives in the economy? Finally, I want to tell the committee, you have talked about the Central Bank of Kenya and the Treasury. Please don't leave it to them. We will be asking you questions. We will not be asking them because you represent the people of Kenya. With those few remarks, thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to support.
Basil Robert, followed by Ndindi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise to add my voice to the members who have supported the report from the Committee of Public Debt and Privatization Committee on Debt Management and Mid-Term Strategy. Mr. Speaker, from onset, I want to say that borrowing is not the problem. If you look at the debt ratio to the GDP of countries like Japan, it stands at 230 to 250%. If you look at a country like United States, the debt ratio to the GDP stands at 120%. In Kenya, our debt ratio to the GDP stands at 68 to 70%. But now the question is, how do we use the money we borrow? That is where the $1 million question stands at. Remember, we are talking of borrowing wisely, spending prudently. And that is where we are falling short from the progressive nations, Mr. Speaker. If you look at our country, instead of investing in very solid impact projects like roads, energy, manufacturing, we are not putting so much emphasis into this. And that is why, as a house that is planning for this country, for now and future generations, Mr. Speaker, we need to reverse the way we are spending our money. If we borrow money, let's put that money in areas where it's going to regenerate itself and be able to have revenue to drive the economy, Mr. Speaker. If you look at the amount of money we are borrowing, we have consequences, and one of it is increased debt. That is the burden to service the debt. That is one of the serious consequences we are having as a country, or we are facing. Most of the poor, they're actually bearing the largest burden to be able to meet the cost of servicing the debt. And that is why, as a house that plans for this country, we need to plan wisely, Mr. Speaker. If you look at our currency, the depreciating Kenya shilling has consequences when it comes to the cost of repaying external debt, Mr. Speaker. And if we don't plan very well, the cost of living will continue to increase, and that will have detrimental consequences in all facets of the economy, Mr. Speaker. So in principle, we need to focus on proper use of the money we borrow, Mr. Speaker. Again, we need to look at better options to be able to raise local resources. We talk of strengthened domestic revenue mobilization. We seal the leakages in tax collection. That is through Kenya Revenue Authority, the KRIM. Mr. Speaker, we need to negotiate for longer grace periods to pay debts, as well as lower interest rates to pay the debts that we borrow. That is on the funds that we borrow. Mr. Speaker, we also need to cut wastages and duplication of resources. Remember, those are some of the areas where our country is losing money, Mr. Speaker. And that is where we are also differing or varying from progressive nations, which have a huge debt ratio to the GDP compared to Kenya, and they're doing better than us. Mr. Speaker, we need to reallocate our funds to the high-impact sectors, which I've already mentioned. We talk of energy, agriculture, which used to be the backbone of the economy. We talk of roads, and we talk of water. And through that, we'll be able to support the repayment of debts, Mr. Speaker. We also need to promote public-private partnership, PPP, like what you see in the Asian Tigers, which are basically Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, as well as South Korea, Mr. Speaker. You find this PPP there, particular road infrastructure, toll stations, etc. And then finally, we need to privatize loss-making parastatals, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't continue incurring burdens or investing where there is no returns on it. I was trying to summarize my own summary.
1 minute, yeah, proceed.
Yes, by saying that we need to realign on how we invest to ensure there is economic returns on investment, so as we don't continue pumping money where there is no return coming out of it. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the report, and it's important we take all these into considerations to move our country forward and our economy, make it better than it is today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this chance to contribute to this very important motion. Honorable Speaker, on the onset, first of all, I want to dissuade the argument that you always have that other countries like Japan and the US has a higher percentage of debt to GDP ratio. It is misplaced, Honorable Speaker, because when we talk about debt, what is reported is what is called gross debt. But there are countries that are both lenders and borrowers. For example, when you bring an argument about Japan having over 200% debt to GDP ratio, Honorable Speaker, the consideration must be that Japan is actually the number one lender of the US economy. And therefore, when you net off all that, then the arithmetic stage. Honorable Speaker, the second thing is the cost. In some years, Japan actually had, from 2010 up to 2020, in some years, Japan 10-year bond was actually attracting negative interest rate, Honorable Speaker, that they were borrowing at below zero. And Honorable Speaker, also, that discounts the fact that we cannot compare economies which are not homogeneous, Honorable Speaker, when we need to make a point. The other thing, Honorable Speaker, now going to the issue, is that I commend the committee and the recommendations. I have listened to the chair in terms of the recommendations of the committee, and I wish the government was actually listening to some of the recommendations made by the reports of this House, because a lot could have been arrested. Honorable Speaker, painting a picture on where we are, President Kibaki took our economy when our national debt, public debt, was around 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings. But actually 600 billion Kenya shillings, sorry. By the time he left, it was around 1.7 to 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings. Meaning the entire 10-year tenure of President Mwai Kibaki, our country borrowed a net of 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings with all that we saw in terms of economic development. President Uhurukenyatta, Honorable Speaker, of course with the Deputy President, who is the current President, took the debt from the then 1.7 trillion, Honorable Speaker, to around 8.7 trillion in 10 years, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, now this administration, in the 3 years and some months that has been there, the debt has grown from 8.7 trillion Kenya shillings to over 12.5 trillion Kenya shillings. Meaning we are borrowing over 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings per annum, Honorable Speaker, on the regular book. There are other loans that we already borrowed outside of the main book. It means, therefore, Honorable Speaker, that Kenya currently is borrowing over 4 billion Kenya shillings every single day. That we are here on a Thursday, Honorable Speaker, by the close of this Thursday, Kenya will have borrowed approximately 4 billion Kenya shillings every single day. And Honorable Speaker, this money is not part of what we see with our eyes, what is growth. Everything that is happening in the road sector is not part of this loan. It is another odious loan called securitization. Everything happening in the construction of stadiums is actually not part of the 4 billion we are borrowing every day. It is another odious debt called Talanta Board, or Honorable Speaker, the board that was listed recently. Honorable Speaker, anything that is happening in the bombers of Kenya is also not part of the 4 billion Kenya shillings Kenya is borrowing every day. That is another odious debt, Honorable Speaker, where we have given up our tourism fund, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the current debt levels in Kenya, I can dare say facing the cameras, that we are now a Ponzi scheme. And to prove the point, I would challenge the National Treasury to go only 2 months without raising money domestically. We will not be able to even pay the salaries, Honorable Speaker. And this report has actually betrayed the many narratives we hear in political gatherings, where we are told by people wearing suits and ties, oh, we have stabilized the economy. But this report, Honorable Speaker, has torn all those lies bare, that in terms of debt, Kenya is in red. The second thing, Honorable Speaker, I want to highlight, that in the debt management strategy that we have, that we want to borrow as a country 78% domestically and only 22% outside. What is this, Honorable Speaker? This is basically crowding out money that should go into the private sector. But this is the major point, Honorable Speaker. Kenyans need to know the reason why we are heavily borrowing domestically other than foreign. It is because of one reason, Honorable Speaker. We are running away from accountability and responsibility. IMF lets Kenya at around 3% on concessional borrowing. Why would you, in a sane mind, leave money on 3% interest rate and go and borrow money on double digit, Honorable Speaker? How can that happen logically?
Give him being actually given a minute each, so see how you can do, how much you can do. But just for the interest of the chair, you said that Japan is borrowing from Japan.
I can make the point.
Order. Japan is borrowing from itself. That's why it's got a 240 something. Where does it borrow from?
If you possibly want me 3 minutes so that I clarify that also.
No, I'll give you more time, but just for the interest of the chair.
This is the point.
reason why Japan, the debt of Japan, the government of Japan's debt is not as dangerous as ours. It's because it's not borrowing from outside. Domestic borrowing. And at the same time, you find fault also with the domestic borrowing in here. Because they say external borrowing would have been cheaper. Even for Japan, how would it be? Can you maybe elaborate on this for the interest of the academic interest of the chair?
Let me start here, Honorable Chair. Japan GDP has not grown in real terms for the last 30 years. Let me start there. Mm-hmm. That dissuades the argument about heavily relying on debt. The Japan GDP has remained around 4.9 trillion US dollars since 1994, Honorable Speaker, in real terms. Second thing, what gets reported when we talk about debt to GDP ratio is gross debt. It does not account for the fact that you have borrowed, but you have also lent. Japan's case is this, Honorable Speaker. Japan, when we report the debt to GDP ratio over 200%, it has not accounted for the fact that Japan is the number one lender to the US, Honorable Speaker. Japan is also a lender to Kenya. That is not discounted. When you discount that, the debt to GDP ratio climbs down drastically, Honorable Speaker. That's the point. But the other issue of domestic and foreign. Honorable Speaker, Japanese debt relies, yes, domestically in terms of resource mobilization. But you look at the cost. Japan can actually afford to borrow domestically at 0.5% and lend to another country at 3%. They will be in business, Honorable Speaker, because their money is cheaper that is coming in than the money that is going out, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, the issue about comparing Kenya and Japan and the US, when we need to make a political point, is totally out of place. Can I now go to my 1 minute?
Except the fact that you're saying the US borrows from Japan heavily, but the GDP to the, what do you call,
GDP, debt to GDP ratio.
Debt to GDP ratio in the US is over 100% of the US economy. Over 100% of the GDP. But then it does not borrow. I'm trying to look for a line that, you can, get the dots,
Okay.
Connect the dots. On the one hand, in Japan, they borrow domestically and lend externally.
Yes.
And lend to the US. So the US essentially should be in a predicament like ours. Actually worse, because they're over 120% GDP to debt ratio. But maybe just educate us on that.
Honorable Speaker, and I'm saying it very respectfully.
Yes.
I'll need an hour only to deal with that alone. Let me start here. When you are dealing with a country.
All right, you have 1 minute, and then we will 1 minute for the benefit, because the chair really wanted you to elaborate.
Can I clarify, then I go to the 1 minute?
1 minute. 1 minute.
For this alone or for my 1 minute?
1 minute.
Okay. Honorable Speaker, the point I was making in terms of domestic borrowing, going back there, we come here and tell Kenyans we are borrowing domestically. But we are borrowing 78% domestically on one account, that we are leaving 3% interest rate money to come to a 10% money, Honorable Speaker. It's for one reason. We don't want accountability that comes with external money. External money, they will require you to do several things. One, you propose to form an infrastructure fund. Infrastructure fund in Kenya should actually be an illegal borrowing fund, because you are forming it to leverage more and to borrow more. External money will tell you, we give you cheaper money, but account this as part of the national debt. But because the government does not want that accountability, then they come and borrow domestically, Honorable Speaker. External money like IMF, World Bank, and the other multilaterals, they will tell you a securitization and Talanta board must be part of the national debt. But, Honorable Speaker, because we do not want that accountability, then we come domestically. Then what do we do domestically? We come and float boats. But who are the buyers? Number one buyer of the boat is NSSF. The number two, Honorable Speaker, is superannuation fund. And therefore, basically, part of this money is actually government borrowing money, its own money, Honorable Speaker. It's actually borrowing money that is meant for workers, Honorable Speaker, because phone calls can be made and NSSF can, in a manner that is not optimal, then channel resources there, Honorable Speaker. We need to know, Honorable Speaker, that the tendency we are on cannot perpetuate forever. We will soon be like Senegal and later on like Ghana. But I hope the decision makers can realize that the stability of our economy is more important than the current.
What's your point of order, Honorable? Although the Honorable Ndini Nyoro has, what's your point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, Ndini is my good friend, but I also wanted to tell him the point we are driving home is prudent use of the money we borrow. And actually, if you talk of Japan, the money they borrow is locally borrowed. You should actually compare a country like Morocco. Morocco, the debt ratio to the GDP is 70%, which is at the same level with Kenya. But you see, Morocco is doing better than Kenya by far. Not export alone. So we also need to be honest ourselves so that we don't just talk criticizing everything, but being positive criticism. And that is what I was trying to tell my brother, Dindi.
What's your point of order, the Honorable Dr. Wilberforce Oundo?
Honorable Speaker, with deference to the young...
No. You can't have a point of order. Order, Wilberforce. You cannot have a point of order on a point of order. Okay, Onchoki. Charles Onchoki.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity so that I can make a contribution to this motion. I wish to...
The chair will make a ruling on a point of order, not you counter-arguing it. Proceed.
I wish to commend the committee for coming up with this strategy, but allow me to make the following observations. I'm not confident that the total public debt is accurate. I'm not sure that the pending bills that we hear from time to time, year in, year out, being interrogated are included as part of the public debt, which they ought to. The same applies to implicit bills or implicit debts, as well as the pensions. So that we need to start from a point of doing a very accurate assessment of our debt position. Mr. Speaker, talking about a 2% to 18% mix of domestic and external borrowing, what it means is that there's going to be crowding out the private sector. The banks are going to sit pretty because they are sure of getting their risk-free 13-14%. They'll not be innovative in looking for more products that can bring more money, particularly targeting the small businesses. So what do the small businesses do when they are crowded out from the formal financial system? They are going to turn to micro and digital lenders. The micro and digital lenders are very interesting players in this market. Many of them are not regulated, but fair to say, their terms of lending are unfair, are unconscionable. The interest rates are anything between 30% to 200%. So what that means is that the fellows are going to look, because they're looking for bridge finance, they're required to find collateral, which is supposed to be maybe a motor vehicle with logbooks, and then evaluation is very poorly done, maybe 50% of the market value of the collateral, and most of these loans are going to be defaulted. So what happens, these poor fellows, the small businesses, are going to have their collaterals seized and auctioned by the lenders, causing distress and failures of businesses, and raising the cost of doing business in the country. Mr. Speaker, we need to have a mix that encourages the private sector to borrow more from our local market so that they can thrive. They can produce services and goods that are competitive from the other markets that have access to this region. So, Mr. Speaker, equally, we need to improve the credit rating of the country so that we can attract the international borrowing that is concessional. We know that we've been struggling as a country to ensure that our rating has improved. We need to do better so that our rating is better. We need to reduce the debt service costs. We need to improve our revenue collection and some of the measures that are going to make sure that our borrowing is sustainable, our debt is sustainable, and that as well as the private sector is not crowded out. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Karoli Omondi.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. I actually rise to acknowledge the boldness of this report and the good work they have done. I think if you see the analysis that has been carried out and the recommendations, it is a very bold report. For example, if you go to paragraph 25, in terms of solvency of our debt sustainability analysis, this report clearly states that the debt to GDP ratio is projected to be about 65%, which actually is above the 55% plus 5 statutory ceiling set out under Section 50 of the Public Finance Management Act, Cap 412. They even go further to say that the targets that have been set, even in 2028, are unlikely to be met. I mean, this is very frank. And I think the country is being given the true picture of our debt situation. Paragraph 26, liquidity perspective. Debt service to revenue, as well as debt service to export ratios, are expected to breach the limits over the medium-term horizon. Honorable Speaker, what is clearly being said is that Kenya's current debt situation is close to what you call debt distress levels. But, Honorable Speaker, whichever parameter you look at, whether it is risk of external debt distress or overall risk of debt distress, all those parameters, the results are that they are very high. And I think this report gives a very true and accurate picture of our situation. But what probably Kenyans need to remember is, how did we get into this? We should remember that in 2014, Kenya was reclassified from a low-income to lower middle-income economy. The reason why this was done, I think they call it rebasing, was that Kenya would then have the capacity to borrow from international financial markets. But what was not properly explained to Kenyans was that the opposite of that would be that we would lose access to other interest-free loans and grants, like what Honorable Ndindi was describing, certain World Bank or Bretton Woods support system. And the net effect of this is that we have begun to borrow from commercial markets, which are more expensive than like with the Eurobond, which we were not even able, the first Eurobond we were not even able to pay. We then refinanced it and borrowed more. And we are now in that famous cycle of African countries who have gone to Eurobond style of always refinancing and recycling that debt. Concessional loans, such as the ones you get from IMF and the World Bank and other multilaterals, would, as Honorable Ndindi has correctly said, would average about 3% interest rate plus service charge and capacity, whatever it is. But commercial loans are anywhere between 8 and 12%. Actually, because of this rebasing, because of this reclassification of Kenya from lower income to lower middle income economy, our debt to GDP ratio rose from 2011, it was at 36% to 68% in 2025. And in 2021, we actually entered into an IMF program to deal with our debt vulnerabilities. So, Honorable Speaker, I think we need a conversation on this issue. Because even the money that was borrowed from the commercial markets to finance the infrastructure, the investments did not yield the economic output that we expected, either in terms of economic performance or better export performance. And the question now that we need to ask ourselves, must we really insist we are a lower middle income economy, or should we just accept that we are a lower income economy and continue to have access to cheaper loans? Honorable Speaker, there are other issues that we need to talk about when we discuss Kenya's debt problems. One is overpricing and corruption of our projects. The securitization, if you look at the Talanta Stadium, when we did an analysis on it, the financing mechanism, 6 billion, we figured out as a committee of sports that there would be 6 billion excess payment. Bomas of Kenya, there's no transparency there. Nobody knows how that is being financed. There's excessive expenditure. We were being told as recent as last week by the Auditor General that State House spent 2.7 billion in excess of its budget. And, Honorable Speaker, unless we do all these things, we deal with corruption, we deal with efficiency, we deal with waste, nothing will change in our debt management. Finally, let me just make a proposal as a way forward. I think it is time to amend the CBK Act to allow subscription to government bonds electronically and in small denominations, just the way we use M-Pesa platform now to buy shares. We should democratize the ownership of borrowing.
The Honorable Wandeto. Wandeto.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to...
It's very interesting to... This is very academic, and I think for the benefit of the chair, it is clearly academic, but very, very interesting also, because the U.S. only borrows 3% of its all. I want Ndini Yoro to hear this. Honorable Ndidi Nyoro, the U.S. only borrows 3% of its own total debt, which is 36 trillion US dollars, and they only borrow 1.2 from Japan. And over 80% of the borrowing of the US government is domestic. And well, we will respond at a later moment, because when that is on there. I want everybody to hear this here, because I'm trying to see if there's a parallel. If you borrow domestically, it's bad, or if you borrow externally. In both cases, there are success stories of both. But anyway, continue, Wandeto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the interesting discourse that you brought to the House. Mr. Speaker, I also rise to support this medium debt strategy, and the people of Balambala should go to bed tonight very proud of their Member of Parliament. They sent a good brain to this House. Mr. Speaker, a number of the issues I would have wished to raise have been raised, and so I'll just gloss over them quickly and maybe just propose one or two bills into this report, even as it goes to the next stage. Mr. Speaker, as it has been rightly pointed out, I think one concern coming out of this report is the proposal to peg our domestic borrowing to about 82%. Knowing, Mr. Speaker, very well that the SME sector is the biggest driver of job creation and economic growth in this country, anything that may undermine access to credit for small businesses and even for households, Mr. Speaker, is going to have a detrimental effect. I think we are basically proposing to perpetuate the level of profitability that we have seen in banks. Even the poorly run banks in this country, Mr. Speaker, all of them make profit, because most of the bank CEOs don't have proper day jobs. All you need to do is to wait for the Friday auction of the CBK paper, bid, and you'll make profit, because there is a ready customer called the government. Mr. Speaker, the second issue is securitization of revenues, because, again, this has to be properly be classified as debt. And I know this is a new mode of financing that we are advocating for in this country, but it is very, very important that all future revenues that have been securitized, we basically recognize that, as public debt. Mr. Speaker, the other issue is pending bills. If you look at pending bills, in my opinion, and I don't have the proper statistics, they must be the third biggest source of government revenue after taxes and borrowing. The third one must be SME financing in the name of public debt. And Mr. Speaker, it's important that maybe in this country we come up with a policy that any pending bill above 180 days, or whatever days we can think about, officially be classified as a public debt. The other one is, Mr. Speaker, is public-private partnerships, which again have become very, very common in this country. And it looks like the Kenya Kwanza government, that is the route that they are advocating. But almost all these PPPs carry a contingent liability. For example, Mr. Speaker, we have this expressway. If it doesn't meet its revenue targets, or if something goes wrong, there is a contingent liability that hangs around the people of Kenya that they would have to pay for it. So this also needs to be classified together with the rest of the public debt. Even the upcoming infrastructure fund, where we are being told that every shilling will attract an additional 10 shillings of debt, also needs to be properly classified, as public debt. But, Mr. Speaker, the elephant in the room on public debt has been value for money. In this country, EACC estimates we lose about 608 billion shillings per year on corruption. Other estimates show that 3 out of every 10 shillings, collected by government is lost in one way or another, to corruption. So how do we progressively ensure that we have value for money for all the taxes we are collecting, for all the borrowings that we are making?
Point of order. Majority Leader, did I hear that you have a point of order? You must have
Honorable Speaker,
your coach, because
I don't catch your eye then.
Yes.
I didn't want to interrupt my good friend, Honorable Wandeto.
What's your point of order?
But he was anticipating debate and actually misleading the country and the House. And I heard, unfortunately, the Honorable Ndidi Nyoro doing the same on the National Infrastructure Fund. And just to inform them, since we are not here at 2:30, there will be debate in the House scheduled next week on the National Infrastructure Fund. Therefore, we cannot be debating the National Infrastructure Fund because I've heard
Anticipation,
both of them saying that the National Infrastructure Fund is part of an undisclosed debt, which is not true. Let them hold their horses, wait for the National Infrastructure Fund bill next week. It will be in the House next week. Avail yourselves and debate on it now. Otherwise, let us stop anticipating debate which is against our own standing orders.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker,
Very, very interesting.
they say the guilty are afraid.
Debates.
But lastly, as I close this, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that...
No, what did you say? Well, what is he guilty of?
No, Mr. Speaker, I didn't refer to anything. That's just my submissions, which I will substantiate what I mean. So, Mr. Speaker, I have not talked about anybody.
Honorable Speaker, I rose on a point of order on the question of anticipation of debate.
Yes.
In response, Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Andreto says that the guilty are afraid.
Guilty of what?
I hope he's not insinuating that Honorable Speaker, if you can protect me from this heckling.
Order, Honorable Muhiano Undo, order. Order.
You know, at least I can engage with the Honorable Undo, the Honorable Andreto, people who have substance.
Order, Honorable members, order.
And some, but the member for Kipipiri cannot engage me on any substance.
Order, Honorable
She doesn't have the intellect to engage me on anything. The Honorable Andreto, I have raised the issue of anticipation of debate.
You made your point very well.
And therefore, Honorable Speaker, I need your protection from those snipers.
I
that
agree.
the guilty, that he must withdraw that statement.
You would be protected
he
by the
needs
chair
to withdraw
because...
that statement. He needs to withdraw that statement and correct whether he was right to anticipate debate on the issue I raised.
Honorable Wandeto.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I'm well guided by Majority Leader
You withdraw.
that we should not debate the infrastructure fund.
Order, you withdraw and apologize to the House.
So I withdraw, Mr. Speaker, and apologize. But I'm not very clear what I'm withdrawing and apologizing.
Proceed,
but for us to move the House forward, because I did not say who is guilty, neither did I say who is afraid. So the majority is feeling his own blanks. But Mr. Speaker, as I conclude on this, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I've asked for previously in this House is a public debt register. Mr. Speaker, if you just walk the next building here called the Treasury, and you independently ask the CS, the PS, the Director of Budget, or even the Director of Debt, what is the government of Kenya debt? I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, and I can bet my money on it, you are going to get 4 different answers. So it is important that public debt is in one register. That register is open. It is something that is open, to public scrutiny. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, because of our foreign-dominated debt, I do not know, and I can be guided by Honorable Shurie, what is our policy on revaluation of debt, especially when we have exchange rate movement. Because again, this needs to be captured very well in this public debt medium strategy. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, despite the interruptions, I submit.
The Honorable Dr. Mutunga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this, to the adoption of the committee report on the medium-term debt management strategy. Honorable Speaker, this particular strategy, it is necessary to have the strategy because it guides the public into borrowing, into management of the debt itself. It's also important because it will help us manage liabilities, Honorable Speaker, and also the costs and the risks, so that, Honorable Speaker, we do not get into debt without realizing, or rather taking into context exactly what it is that we are borrowing. Honorable Speaker, I've looked at the strategy, and it highlights on many issues as a legal requirement, first of all, and it highlights on government's commitments to maintain public debt at sustainable level. Honorable Speaker, if we did not want to sustain the debt, we wouldn't mind to have a strategy. And because we want to have this debt sustained, we want to be able to pay, we want to balance out the equation. That is the reason why we have the strategy. It will also, Honorable Speaker, enable us to mitigate exchange rate risks. We have risks associated with exchange rates. And with this particular strategy, it is possible for us to structure out the debt and also look at the debt market analysis. Get to know where can we get better rates. Should we go for external or should we go for domestic debt? And each of them has got implications on our speaker. If we go for external debts on our speaker, we have possibilities of negotiating a long-term borrowing. We have possibilities of negotiating what we call concessional loans. And we also have possibilities of negotiating the period before the period before we start repayment, the grace period. So on our speaker, when you look at the local situation or the borrowing from the local market or internally, it also enables us to sustain our economy as a people, enables us to offload the bills, the treasury bonds. On our speaker, it also enables us to inform the government of the opportunities that are there, the opportunities for borrowing, and the diversity of possibilities that we have. It also enables us to advise on the reforms that need to be made so that we are able to enhance cost reduction and also to mitigate risks that might come as a result of having this particular debt. Honourable Speaker, several speakers have alluded to the amount of debt that we have, but I quote that the end of June 2025 debt situation as 11.814 trillion. This is the information that we have, whereby which is 67.8% of the GDP. Honourable Speaker, it is important to manage the debt through a strategy so that we do not keep on increasing the debt. We do not basically borrow carelessly. Analysis of the Kenya situation, Honourable Speaker, shows that it is possible for us to borrow. There is a lot of fear, hue and cry as we are borrowing, and then we will possibly buy others from the opportunity to borrow. But analyzing the macroeconomic situation in Kenya, we realize that macroeconomic indicators clearly indicate that our economy is stable, that we are able to manage the debt properly, and not only the debt, Honourable Speaker, we can guarantee, based on what the figures used in the BPS, we are clear that this economy is going to grow at around 5.3%. We are also clear that if the agricultural sector continues producing or productivity is sustained, if the environment doesn't change, and if we have resilient service sector, and also we have the implementation of BITA goes on. And Honourable Speaker, when you talk about implementation of the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, BITA is a major project within this particular country. It's a major undertaking. It is a major investment. And this investment basically shakes the economy in the sense that it's injecting resources into the economy, it's creating possibilities for our people to be employed, it's also opening up frontiers for different parts of this country to develop, and also offering opportunities in a variety of ways. So, Honourable Speaker, when you look at the central bank rates, the central bank rates have gone down from 13% to around 9%, and this means, therefore, the cost of credit is low. So it enables people to access credit, and that assurance itself improves on the borrowing capacity of the people. Honourable Speaker, looking at what proportion has gone to what is targeted at what, we are looking at 82% being from the domestic, according to the strategy. And this helps us to realize that our economy is growing, our economy is becoming resilient, and it's also can sustain some of these issues. Honourable Speaker, the strategy is okay because it enables us to structure out in development in the midst of so many possible shocks. It also helps us basically to manage payment of the debt in the event that we have socio-economic shocks across the world. Honourable Speaker, with those few remarks, I support adoption of the committee report.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I rise to support this report and the motion by the Debt Committee, and allow me to take this opportunity to commend the Honourable Shurie and all the members of the Debt Committee for the great work that they have put in. Honourable Speaker, if you go through the resolutions of the committee, because I hear what many of us are tempted to do is to speak to the gallery and not restrict ourselves to what is before the House. And I know many are tempted to speak to the gallery because they think it will excite those ones out there. But when you are elected to this House, Honorable Speaker, you are charged with the responsibility to oversight government, legislate, and also represent the people, but not to mislead the people. And Honorable Speaker, that is why I rose on points of order. When people start misleading the country that the National Infrastructure Fund is another fund for borrowing, because it is not. And those who sit in the debt committee will tell you. Honorable Speaker, the other lie that I have listened to is that securitization is another form of borrowing. Far from it, Honorable Speaker. It is not another form of borrowing, Honorable Speaker, because all that you do in securitization is a conversion of your non-liquid or non-tradable assets into tradable securities, Honorable Speaker. That does not constitute borrowing, Honorable Speaker. And that is exactly why when you securitize, Honorable Speaker, you move the assets that you're doing out of your balance sheet. That is why the securitization process that you have done with your roads is not part and parcel of the balance sheet of the government of Kenya. And that is why the trade committee, the debt committee, Honorable Speaker, will not be reporting to you on such issues as part of the borrowing of our country, because they are not part of your balance sheet. And even you as an individual, if something is not on your balance sheet, is neither an asset or a liability on your balance sheet, it cannot be part of your borrowing, Honorable Speaker, because your borrowing will be part and parcel of your liabilities on your balance sheet, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, allow me to restrict myself to the issues that have been raised by the committee, the real issues that we should be doing as a House, because the debt committee has done very well. And if you read their recommendations, part of what they are telling you to do, especially on public-private partnerships, is to ensure that PPPs, securitization, and other alternative financing mechanisms are fully integrated into a fiscal risk reporting and stress testing. Because that is all we need to do as a nation, to ensure that all our PPP projects, all our securitized and other alternative forms of financing that we get into do not in any way in the future overburden our country or become a risk to our economy, Honorable Speaker. Because when you create special purpose vehicles outside of the mainstream systems, Honorable Speaker, you must also be able to test them, stress test them, as the committee is telling us. And that is the responsibility our debt committee and this House must carry out very well. Honorable Speaker, the other good recommendation that I saw is the call for the National Treasury to do what they call risk mitigation plan around the election cycle. Because every electoral cycle, every 5 years, Honorable Speaker, you know, our country is faced with risks around the electoral processes. And therefore, this is the right time, and I must commend Honorable Shuria and the committee for sensitizing the National Treasury and all of us that we must have risk mitigation mechanisms or plans to mitigate on risk that will be associated with the interruptions that come during electioneering times and during our electoral cycle, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the other recommendation, Honorable Speaker, that the committee has called on this House to do revolves around the issue of our expenditure rationalization. Because every year, and I've heard some of us say that we make recommendations that Treasury doesn't follow through. We must ensure, and the Budget and Appropriations Committee, our Public Debt Committee must help us, because this House works through committees, to ensure that there is proper rationalization of expenditure. And especially now as we run towards the elections, there are things that will come in for IBC, requirements for IBC, and other security-related issues that if we do not plan ahead of time could be a risk to our costs or expenditure rationalization plans. And therefore,
I'll add you three, because
thank you, Honorable Speaker.
You are a former chair of budget.
Yes. And you know, when I was a former chair of budget, Honorable Speaker, even when I was removed as chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, I stood firm to ensure that I supported the regime then in ensuring that we do the right thing. And when things were not done right, I would call it out. When they were done right, I would have the fortitude and the courage and the boldness to say, this is good for the country, because we must grow beyond petty politics, because at times we allow petty politics and anger and the desire for revenge and settling scores to override common sense. And we even allow intellectual conmanship and deceit to take center stage. And you mislead the country by speaking very good English here, or very bad English, colored in heavy words, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, when we tell this country that Mwai Kibaki's budget was this much, borrowing was this much, you must ask yourself, Mwai Kibaki's regime operated under the old constitution of before 2010. They did not have the 400, almost 500 billion shillings today that you are obligated by the constitution to send to your county governments. The heavy budgetary requirements that the Uhuru Kenyatta regime and this regime beyond 2013 are confronted with are things that did not pertain when Mwai Kibaki was president, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we cannot say that when President Mwai Kibaki took over government in 2003 from the KANU regime in 2002, there weren't issues. Issues were there. But truth be told, we have a very heavy governance system in this country. And I say this because I was in this house in 2013, Honorable Speaker, when the former chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, the Reverend Mutava Musimi, conducted the budget, the then huge budget committee that incorporated the Finance Committee and even the Debt Committee. It was a 51-member committee. Through a process where this House, through the Budget Committee, audited the implementation of the 2010 Constitution. And those records are here for those who care to read. So don't pontificate telling us, oh, things were here, they're here now. Mwai Kibaki was at this debt level. Be honest. Tell Kenyans that the circumstances then are not the circumstances under the 2010 Constitution. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, borrowing is not a sin. It is not. And I heard the Honorable Kwenya and the Honorable Basil say the question we must be asking ourselves as leaders, is our borrowing sustainable? Are we putting our country in borrowing that we can be able to pay? Is domestic borrowing evil? No, it is not. We just need to make sure that our domestic borrowing is well balanced. And that is what I see the committee saying, that there must be a clear balance on our domestic borrowing so that it doesn't negatively affect our CBR rate and therefore cloud out the private sector from domestic borrowing. And that is why we need the alternative financing mechanisms. That is why we need securitization. Let us not demonize securitization. Because if we do not go for those alternative modes of financing, it means we go back and borrow. Is IMF loans and World Bank loans cheaper? Yes, they are. Can we access them as quickly as we'd want to be able to finance our obligations? No, we can't. That is the truth. And those of us who have served in the Budget and Appropriations Committee, those of us who have served in the Finance Committee, know this as facts. And therefore, that's why I say, when we come and pontificate here and speak to the gallery, Honorable Speaker, again, let us be leaders. Let us not just politic. Cheap politics, at the end of the day, ends up in premium tiers, Honorable Speaker. And I want to ask those who are using these processes for cheap politics, it will end up in premium tiers, Honorable Speaker. I support the recommendations of this committee, and especially even in being able to increase how much we are putting into development expenditure. Part of that development expenditure is what will come through securitization. Otherwise, we run the risk of taxing Kenyans more or borrowing more. That balance is what we need through alternative forms of financing. And so long as it's done responsibly, as the debt committee is asking us to do, so long as we balance how we borrow domestically and externally, and whether it's commercial or concessional loans, Honorable Speaker, we are good.
Honorable Njikumuya.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Allow me to stand and say the committee has done a good job in its report, and in all recommendations, they look okay. But, Honorable Speaker, matters of debt and its management are matters that are of concern to every Kenyan, and no one should really have feelings when you are discussing these matters. Furthermore, there is no prescription in this house that you don't speak to the gallery. You speak in this house, within its walls, whether you speak to the gallery, but every member can speak what is in his mind. Honorable Speaker, the debt management in this country are wanting, because if the levels are 55 and we are already speaking at 70 plus, clearly something is not right. Honorable Speaker, the debt management, and I'm happy because I've seen the amendment proposed for PFM Act, are accruing and increasing day in, day out. To an extent, the unborn children are bearing or are also supposed to pay the debt in this country. Why? Because of corruption, because of unclear budgets, because of integrity issues, transparency in budget, accountability in governance. Honorable Speaker, we see empowerment every day in the State House, every day in our counties. Where are these kind of budgets coming from? Honorable Speaker, the unnecessary spending in this country is making this debt continue increasing day in, day out.
Must see it.
When the government think of taxes, what of tax evasion? Are the big boys paying taxes or only the small boys paying taxes? This is maybe one area that is making the budget, the balance sheet not balance, so that we go on asking for money from international leaders or others. Honorable Speaker, could the government think of focusing on matters of production, mainly innovation, tech, which can enhance employability, and which can, issues like manufacturing, which can also enhance issues like export? These are the areas that the 100 government political advisors in the State House should be advising the government. Honorable Speaker, how do we attract the investors in this country? When the young youths demonstrate and they are charged with issues like terrorism, what is the government telling the investors who would want to come and invest in our country? So, Honorable Speaker, all these, including the mismanagement, the corruption, the massive looting, are issues that this House should be discussing. We shouldn't really be comparing ourselves with America, with the countries like Japan, because if it is matters of production, we know how much production is in America compared to Kenya. So, Honorable Speaker, issues like housing. Housing is an avenue that should be left to investors. So when the government want to compete with investors and do things like housing, maybe that kind of money could have been used elsewhere, which would have enhanced a certain area, let's say like exploration of gas or minerals or oil in Turkana and others, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I am very happy to see one recommendation on amendment of PFM Act. But I want to ask the committee to be more candid and aggressive in this amendment. What is in my mind, Honorable Speaker, when we are giving the government sometimes an open check, and we say so long as we are not going beyond 55, we are still okay. I think we leave it and we leave a loophole. Maybe what this House and the committee should legislate and make an amendment in the PFM Act is to ask transparency. What are we borrowing such amount of money? For what project such amount of money? We put full disclosure to this House. We approve a certain amount of money that would be borrowed, knowing too well that the money is going to be spent in this area to the last penny. Matters of interest rate. These are issues that the experts should guide the government with. At times we may borrow when the interest rate is at, when the exchange rate is at 100%, then the exchange...
Half a second, please.
Half a minute.
Which cannot work, so 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we have seen at time the exchange rate skyrocket. Maybe we borrowed at 100, at an exchange rate of even 80. And when we are paying back, we are paying at an exchange rate of 130. These are matters where the experts who advise the government or treasury should be discussing when they are borrowing, so that they agree that could even the exchange rate increase, we could pay not beyond this kind of exchange rate. With that, Honorable Speaker, I thank you. I speak of corruption, massive looting, this unnecessary empowerment, and I ask the government to focus on production.
Very well. Leader, proceed, Junet Mohammed.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the report of the committee, Mr. Speaker, on the consideration of the 2026 debt management strategy. Mr. Speaker, debt has been a big problem for this country for many years. But what I'm shocked about, people always remember the current debts. They don't remember where these debts have come from and how they have started. I was just listening to the former chairman of the budget committee shouting hoarse here that the debt is not sustainable. I don't know what. Much of these debts were incurred when he was the chairman of the budget committee. And he's the one who approved them in this house, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was listening on my way to Parliament that he's saying that he was complaining initially. First, you don't come with the lecture hall notes to Parliament. When you are studying somewhere, doing masters in some economic class, don't come with your notes to the House, Mr. Speaker. You come with your brain here, Mr. Speaker. You can't carry. Standing orders prohibits people from reading from notes, Mr. Speaker. You go and meet your lecturer, and then he gives you some small notes like Ile Mwakenya, old Mwakenya style. Then you come and use them here in the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you come here with your brain because this is a house of people who should reason with their brain. Mr. Speaker, the other day he was telling us that the stockbroker, the other day he was telling us that Kenya Pipeline will not be bought. I am hearing now it has been oversubscribed, Mr. Speaker. He was saying that the Safaricom shares were overpriced. Now today again he's saying they are underpriced. Which one is which, Mr. Speaker? That kind of confusion is not good for the economy of this country, Mr. Speaker. That kind of confusion is not good for the country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when you're a toddler in economic matters, stick to your lane, Mr. Speaker. Stick to your lane. Don't become an intellectual and economic powerhouse after you have been sacked as a budget committee chair, Mr. Speaker. You stick to your lane. If you're a man who's handling a CDF committee money, just stick to that lane, Mr. Speaker. Other things are bigger than you. Mr. Speaker, I am not trying to defend this regime. But when this government came into power, Mr. Speaker, the economy was in a very bad situation. Inflation was very high. We were almost at the brink of debt distress or even defaulting, Mr. Speaker. You know, inflation was almost double digit. We didn't have even enough fuel to fuel our cars in this country, Mr. Speaker. Today, inflation is at the lowest rate. The economy is growing over 5%, Mr. Speaker, heading to 5%. So, Mr. Speaker, let us not lie to Kenyans when you don't want to say the truth. If the truth does not suit your political agenda, then don't lie to Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. I am in a region I represent a constituency which has seen tarmac just the other day. This country has been borrowing for the last 60 years to develop certain regions of this country. And we are paying those debts as Kenyans, all of us, Mr. Speaker. We are paying taxes to service those debts. You know, hii ni mwaka ya kuongea ukweli. This is the year of the truth. The year of the Lord, 2026. Mr. Speaker, this country has been borrowing the last 60 years to develop tarmac roads, to give water, to give health care to just certain regions of this country, Mr. Speaker. This is the time to get equitable distribution of resources so that every Kenyan can feel he's a Kenyan, Mr. Speaker. If you go, in fact, we have been demanding as ODM for the last 5 years to have an audit, the debt to be audited, or an audit of the debt, Mr. Speaker, because we knew that this debt has not been used equitably. You have been told this country has borrowed last 10 years 1 trillion. I don't see anything in my constituency. I don't see a road. I don't see this is now when I'm seeing roads. It is now that I'm seeing dams. It is now I'm seeing healthcare facilities being built. It is now that I'm seeing housing being done. Now, Mr. Speaker, the other day, 1,500 housing units have been advertised in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. For the first time since independence. The last group who worked in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, were the colonialists. I have never seen any development after colonialists, Mr. Speaker. The last building, even where the county commissioner is using, was built by the colonial regime, Mr. Speaker. Yes, after the colonialists, we have just been waiting for the government. And this broad-based now is when we have seen things opening up, Mr. Speaker. And Kenya has been incurring debts. Kenya has been collecting debts, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these new prophets in town, hii manabii ya uongo, must stop what they are saying, Mr. Speaker. They must allow every Kenyan to enjoy the debt. If we are going to borrow, all of us must enjoy that debt, Mr. Speaker. We cannot borrow for a certain group to enjoy and then we pay together. Have you ever seen? Mr. Speaker, the leader can inform me. Because he's a chartered accountant. You know that,
Honorable Junet.
Senior accountant in the
It's
country.
not your prerogative, but anyway, leader, proceed to inform Honorable.
Honorable Speaker, you know, I've been to Suna, both Suna East and Suna West, and it is indeed true. And I wanted to inform the Honorable Junet that courtesy now of the alternative financing models, Suna West, Suna East, many parts in Migori County, and he can attest to that, are now seeing new markets being built, affordable housing being built. In fact, I saw a clip yesterday where somebody was saying, now even Jaluo can wave from the balcony. Those guys who patronize Bunga la Mwananchi. But more importantly, Honorable Speaker, what Junet is saying is that debt is not criminal to borrow. Honorable Speaker, you know there are people who have been pontificating here as if this is the first time we are borrowing. What happened, Honorable Speaker, is that in the last regime, debt was not managed. Our public debt was not managed. That is why if you listen to CS John Buddy, he will tell you that, and I have heard even the president say that, and these are facts that you can verify, even from reports by the World Bank and IMF, that out of 6 countries, African economies that were to default or were earmarked, that they were bound to default on their public debt. The only country that never defaulted was Kenya. All the other 5 African economies defaulted. Why? Because there has been deliberate management of public debt. And that public debt management is what we should be speaking to here, not the pontification you hear from people here who are just trying to make cheap political capital to push their village narratives, Honorable Speaker. And I must thank Honorable Junet because he has reminded us that there are many parts of this country that were secluded from development because people borrowed and that borrowing only went to certain parts of this country. And everybody was paying back that debt, Honorable Speaker. So let me inform Junet that I know even the dualing of national highways will go through Migori to Isebania so that we connect our economy to Tanzania and other economies in East Africa.
Very well. Proceed to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying, you know, Mr. Speaker, I've just learned recently that politicians, when they lose their positions, either chairman of a committee or something, they can become motivational speakers. Mr. Speaker, they go to some hall, they say, oh, if you borrow 10,000, you don't need to put in that scheme, you put in this housing, then that housing is not going to give you money, put it in stock brokers. These are motivational speakers, Mr. Speaker. This country requires serious men and women like the people handling our economy today. People like John Buddy. Yes. Those are the people who can take us far, not motivational speakers, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, as the leader has said, borrowing is not the issue. The issue is how you manage your debt. Even you, when you can borrow as an individual, if you don't manage your debt as an individual, you'll be auctioned. So, Mr. Speaker, we must give credit to this government. That's the truth. We must give to this government that they found things that were very bad and they have managed it. They managed to pay the Eurobond. They managed to pay all the Chinese debts that were due. And today, Mr. Speaker, this country is not under debt.
Honorable Junet, You have done very well. Add him 1 minute, he's a leader. Add him 1 minute, he's a leader. Just 1 minute. You have a microphone. Leader, you have a microphone there.
Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude on by saying that you remember when, after the general election, there was Eurobond to be paid. Who borrowed the Eurobond? Who put Kenya in the debt of the Eurobond? People who are destroying now my party or ODM are the people who borrowed those things, Mr. Speaker. And they're using that money now to destroy my party, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Honorable Eric Muchangi. Don't get worried, members will speak to this, and I can see you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and allow me, Honorable Speaker, to support this report by this committee. It is, looking at it, it is a good report, and Honorable Speaker, my attention is drawn to only about 2 areas in their recommendations on the issue of the National Treasury scaling up development expenditure above the minimum 30%. And Honorable Speaker, one big problem we have in our country is that we borrow finances from all the sources, but not all our resources are utilized prudently, Honorable Speaker. And the same Public Finance Management Act requires that not above 35% of our resources are spent towards wages and salaries. And Honorable Speaker, looking into the budgets by our counties, which are the units that where we have our public resources utilized and spent, most of our counties have wage bills above 50%. So that tells we borrow our resources, and much of it is spent to pay wages and salaries. And I am not sure, Honorable Speaker, how sustainable this is, because we borrow as a country in the hope that most of our resources will be used to develop our country, but much of it is not utilized in the best way. Then, Honorable Speaker, at the center of this debt management strategy should be the fight against corruption, or rather, whatever means we should apply to have our institutions account for the resources is what we must apply. Because, Honorable Speaker, it cannot be said that this country doesn't have resources. We have a lot of resources at our disposal. Some of it borrowed, some of it generated from our own country, but, Honorable Speaker, a lot of it is wasted through unnecessary spending, renovations, and acquisitions that are not a priority for this country. So, Honorable Speaker, even as we look into how to manage our debt as a country, we must pay a lot of attention, very keen attention, to how we manage corruption in this country, because it is a serious impediment to our growth as a country. So, Honorable Speaker, I support.
We have the Honorable Tindi Mwale. He's been here for some time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the committee's report on management of on debt management strategy 2026. Mr. Speaker, from experience that we gained from the Public Accounts Committee, we have always seen the Auditor General questioning why we have interest rates on undrawn loans. And Mr. Speaker, the issue is that sometimes, or in most cases, when you are doing budgeting, we have 2 components, the GOK component and the donor-funded component. You will find that many of the government state departments, especially National Treasury, will go ahead and commit on loans, but it will not use the loans as per the time factor. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to support the committee that we need to amend the PFM Act 2012-2015 so that whenever we engage any donor to give us a loan or a debt, we are able to use the debt accordingly. We are able also to negotiate in a way that the government is able to pull more on its side than the side of the donor. Also, Mr. Speaker, you'll find many of the debts that we have with the last regime, and I want to support the minority leader, used to borrow even commercial debt to pay government employees, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the committee led by Honorable Shurie that we need to manage the borrowing of debt so that if we borrow, we should specifically and seriously borrow for development, not to pay recurrent income expenditure, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I rise to support the report, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honorable Wamuchomba, followed by Honorable Mukunji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to put my words into the consideration of this strategy, debt management strategy debate. Mr. Speaker, I was honored to serve in the Committee of Transport and Communication in the previous Parliament. And I sat in a chair and listened to several members of Parliament who came to the committee to plead with the minister during budget allocations so that their constituencies can be considered for tarmacking. Mr. Speaker, allow me to mention one of my colleagues who may not be in the House now, but I want to use his constituency as an example of how serious and dangerous it can be when a country takes a debt but is not able to manage. And before I speak about that constituency, Mr. Speaker, allow me to laud the current President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency William Samoei Ruto. It is not very common for me to say what I'm going to say. We doubted him, we didn't believe in him. When he spoke about managing debts, we thought it was just a narrative. When he promised that he's going to make sure that we access fertilizer, we thought it was just another story. Today, Mr. Speaker, I come from an agricultural constituency. Fertilizer was 7,500 shillings per bag. Today, we are spending 2,500 shillings for the same bag, even with the inflation consideration. Even if you don't like anybody or somebody, even if you have bad feelings about somebody, when something good has been done, it is good for us leaders to speak the truth. Mr. Speaker, that does not happen just because of a miracle. It happened because somebody managed our situation. He came in when we were struggling to pay our debts. He managed the financial crisis that were therein, and he was able to stabilize the basic commodities that can enable star production in our villages. Mr. Speaker, back to what I said about my previous role as a vice chair of the Committee of Transport. Then when we were debating on which constituency is going to get what, when I was the vice chair, there is this member called Honorable Danson Mwashako Mwakuona, the current MP for Wundanyi constituency. He appeared in the committee last Parliament, pleaded with the committee and the minister to be considered to at least get 1 kilometer of tarmac. 1 kilometer. Mr. Speaker, I come from Githunguri constituency. I'm not speaking about 1 kilometer in my constituency. I'm not talking about 20 kilometers in my constituency. I have more. And I sit in this house as a member, like any other member in this house, who has not even a single kilometer of tarmac. Mr. Speaker, even as we speak about our people, our voters, we must remember that we have one fabric called Kenya. And as we speak about some regions enjoying tarmac, enjoying housing, enjoying airports, we must consider those that come from such corners of Kenya who have never experienced a kilometer of tarmac. It will not happen by narratives or theories or proposals. It will only happen by managing our situation financially, including debts. Let us allow the president of the day manage the situation. As a house, we must support him and advise him so that he can manage the situation and ensure
that as I receive 2,180 units of affordable housing in Githunguri, all other constituencies in this country get the same share. Mr. Speaker, debts do not have a rubber stamp of who received how many kilometers of tarmac. It is normally referred as a Kenyan debt, not as a regional debt. So as we manage our debt, we must make sure every corner of this country is benefiting from our crisis if we have a crisis, or as our gains if we have a gains. So, Mr. Speaker, those that are campaigning in funerals and weddings on how poorly we are performing as a government must also tell us, when they were in that position, what did they do? I am not here to attack anybody, but Mr. Speaker, allow me to put it as it is. You cannot tell us that we are not going to benefit from recovering assets, liquidating our assets so that we can help our people recover from the financial crisis, and you have no alternative solution. For me, as I listen to people speak, I want to hear solutions. I want to see tangible projects. Mr. Speaker, allow us to debate this matter, advise the president, advise the executive on many avenues and ways of managing our debt crisis without putting the blame on a few of the...
Honorable Mkunji.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I also want to put in my word on the report of the medium-term debt management strategy. And Honorable Speaker, I first want to start clearly by differing with the majority leader, even if he has left. Honorable Speaker, when the majority leader misleads the nation by saying that
Honorable Mkunji,
securitization is not
order. Speak to this. You have a chance. Enjoy. Don't speak to leader. Speak to this debate. Proceed.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. I just want to say that securitization is borrowing. And Honorable Speaker, it is only that you are borrowing against revenue that is supposed to have been received by the future generation of this nation. Honorable Speaker, I want this House to take the issue of debt seriously, because we are here, Honorable Speaker, today, but in another 5 years, we have a generation that is growing. We have Gen Zs that need to get jobs. And sustainability of our borrowing, Honorable Speaker, is something that is supposed to be discussed. Honorable Speaker, the fuel levy, the housing levy, our dividends, these are things that Kenyans receive every year. And those are resources that are received and that are supposed to be utilized, knowing that in the future of the nation, yes, we might need all the roads made, but we must not strangle the future of our nation by borrowing everything and making it difficult for this nation to run in future. Because, Honorable Speaker, we are talking about resources here. The biggest question, Honorable Speaker, is the issue of how the monies that have been received, either through debt, through revenue, are used in this country. That is the biggest question. And, Honorable Speaker, we can talk here and forget that every day there is always a query from the Auditor General. There is always a newspaper article on lost funds. There is always a ballooned renovation, maybe of State House. Honorable Speaker, there is a ballooned construction of a certain stadium. And these are things, Honorable Speaker, that are eating our taxes and are making us borrow even more. And, Honorable Speaker, preparing to read our budget this year of 4.6 trillion, with our collection previously having been around 2.6 trillion, it tells you that we are actually getting money from debt to actually fit the fiscal deficit. And it's good to say that this House has actually signed off the management of debts of this country to some expert analysis without those analyses being brought here for approval. I feel, as the committee has recommended, Honourable Speaker, as the committee has recommended, all securitization.
Let me hear a point of order from Honourable Muchomba.
Mr. Speaker, is it in order for the member for Runyenjes to, for Honourable Mukonji, to refer to some agencies or some private companies that have been signed off to manage our debts without tabling documents to that effect?
Oh, therefore,
he's out of order.
Honourable Mukunji, I also heard you. You need to substantiate.
Honourable Speaker, first, I'm not the member of Runyenjes, so I will not answer Honourable Mushomba. I will just continue with my contribution.
Order, Honourable Mukunji. Relax. These are hours of debate, and I'll give you more time. Just asking you to substantiate what you did say about this House signing off to agencies. Substantiate that.
Honourable Speaker, I will just substantiate by explaining the law that we passed in this House. We passed a law and said that, Honourable Speaker, we are going to anchor our debts to the GDP. Honourable Speaker, experts must analyze and know very well that the GDP of our nation, without even the scrutiny of this House, is this much. And then after that, we are able to borrow more. And those are experts, Honourable Mushomba, that are supposed to do that. And that is how we have gotten to serious levels of borrowing, Honourable Speaker, in a way that we are not able to actually know how much debt this country has at any single time.
Honourable Mukunji, you don't have the capacity to do that, and I can see, I'm a teacher of economics, and I can see you have completely swayed to the ratio of debt, the debt ratio to GDP, which does not relate to the question that you actually raised and you have been asked. So quickly, I want you to proceed with the debate. Withdraw and proceed.
Withdraw what, Honourable Speaker? I am giving my comments of the report that is on the floor.
You are unable.
Honourable Speaker, when I say, Honourable Speaker, when I say it is experts that analyze the GDP of our nation, am I wrong?
Order, Mukunji. You are unable to substantiate. When you are unable to substantiate and you are unable to have facts, you quickly withdraw and proceed with your debate. It's not making you any weak in any way. And we are also helping you to get used to debate. Give him the mic to proceed. Withdraw and proceed.
Honourable Speaker, I have to withdraw something that I've said that is supposed to be substantiated. All I have said is it is experts, financial experts, that do the analysis of GDP. It is not this House, and that is, I stand with that.
Oh, thank you. So you are misquoted.
I was misquoted by Honourable Mushomba.
Proceed then.
Honourable Speaker, I just want to say that...
yes. Yes, Honourable Muchomba.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Mukunji is out of order because this is a House of records and we must have record to support any debate, especially an allegation of what was done by this House. He's claiming that this House passed on the power to manage debts. How did we pass? Which document did we sign? Where is the document? He must substantiate and table the document. Otherwise, he must withdraw.
Honourable Mukunji. That's what the House is. It's a house of records. And no, once you are captured clearly, like you put it, and you are unable to substantiate, you withdraw and proceed with your debate. Could you do that and proceed with the debate?
Yeah, Honorable Speaker, unless you want me to bring a law that we have passed in this House back to Amoshomba for her to read, then, Honorable Speaker, I don't have to even argue on this.
No,
it is obvious we actually amended the law to ensure we anchor our debt to the GDP of the nation. That is obvious. I mean, it doesn't have to even, it doesn't require any explanation whatsoever. All we need to know is by doing that.
Honorable Mukunji, you are out of order. And it's not your business to argue with me when I'm your speaker on matters of record of the House and such undertakings. And the debate here should be very easy. When you have the capacity, you speak on something, you explain it when you are asked. When you are unable, you actually honorably withdraw and proceed. That's all we are asking of you. And I want you to grow as a member of parliament in the next coming session. Some of us, I'm sure, we shall not be coming here. We shall be doing something else. So get used to the House. Could you please either withdraw or you forfeit, and I may decide on how to deal with you, because now you want an argument between the Speaker and yourself on facts.
Honorable Speaker, as long as I believe what I have said is the correct thing, there is no need for me to say I've withdrawn anything, Honorable Speaker, because this is just law. This is bills that we pass in this House. It was among the first bills that we passed, Honorable Speaker. And it is not even something that is supposed to be argued about. Because when you pass a law, it is followed. From then, henceforth, we have not sat in this House to increase our debt ceiling. It is normally looked at by experts, and we are told, now we can borrow this much. Or we are told to reduce our debt. It is automatically something that should not be argued about, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. I think, Honorable Mukunji, you are unable to withdraw, and you don't want to follow the order and the normal rules that we use in the House. And therefore, I would advise that you proceed to withdraw that. And if you don't want to withdraw, then you forfeit your chance.
Honorable Speaker, I will not withdraw. Because I believe what I've stated is in the public domain. And, Honorable Speaker, we can talk even up to tomorrow. But the fact of the matter is we changed the law and anchored the debt levels to the GDP ratio, Honorable Speaker. And it's obvious.
This is a House of Rules and Order. Let's have the Honorable Ridikiri Murungaru, Ridikiri, speak on this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You see, the problem we're having is populism and having substantive debate on a very important matter, like the one that is in front of us. Mr. Speaker, I am of the view that the document that has been presented by the committee contains the key aspect of a policy, and this specific one is the debt management policy. Mr. Speaker, one of the greater problems that we have witnessed a long time ago in this country is borrowing to finance recurrent activities which are not for production. And I want to pick from where Madam Amuchomba started from. That we have seen a government that is now focusing on production as opposed to financing activities that don't have long-term effect on this economy. Mr. Speaker, we have seen a serious improvement in the debt management in the sense that the public now are being involved in the debt management of this country. We have seen a lot of transparency in as far as borrowing is concerned. Mr. Speaker, we have seen a reduction of external borrowing and an increase in domestic borrowing, which to me is very key because we still have, instead of paying our debt in dollars, we are now seeing the money being borrowed domestically and it becomes cheaper. We have seen the policy moving towards and raising long-term borrowing at cheaper rates as opposed to some of the debts that we have with very short period of repayment. So when we sit here as a parliament, we sit here so that we can see what a proper debt management policy is, not to try and bring politicking so that we can be seen out there by our constituents that we are speaking in parliament. We are here because debt is a very serious issue in this country. I want to congratulate His Excellency the President because the debts that were taken by the first government, by the second government, by the third government, by the fourth government, were all starting to be paid during the current government. And the President has been in front of championing, restructuring, implementing productive programs with the money that is borrowed. So, Mr. Speaker, we can't come here and trivialize and bring politics. This government is serious on matters of agriculture. And I wish majority of the money that have been borrowed for all this by all these government were being put in agriculture. We will not be talking about food scarcity of food in this country. If we put a lot of money that was borrowed in sectors like water, we will not be talking about the effect of drought. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this policy because it is simple and very clear that the government is now focused to deliver, and anything that is going to assist this government to deliver, it must be supported. So I support this policy because it's addressing the cost, the length of maturity, the cheapness of the loans, etc., etc. I thank you.
Very well, honorable members. I think the time for this particular debate is already exhausted. I want to call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I would like to take this opportunity to reply on behalf of the Chairman, Abdi Shurie, and his committee. Honorable Speaker, let me reply. I can see the member for Magarini would like a bite from my time, but I think the standing orders are such that if I start speaking, then I cannot. He should have talked to me earlier, so that. But I have already started the debate on this. So I want to say this. One, I want to support this report in reply, Honorable Speaker. And so this is a quite elaborate report, and I want to thank the committee and everybody else that has contributed, Honorable Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Mchomba.
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to ask whether it is in order or you can guide whether he can donate a minute to the honorable member who's been waiting.
Indeed, he should have had that chance, but somewhat he was not informed, so he went ahead to proceed. The stage where he is, let him now proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Speaker. I would have loved to do that, but you see, I'm also totaler to rules. But I want to thank the committee. Good job done, Honorable Speaker. I think the recommendations that are done here are weighty and good recommendations, Honorable Speaker, that the 9 recommendations that have been made by the committee on the, how to manage debt, Honorable Speaker, are things that are significant, and when followed, Honorable Speaker, will put debt on the right trajectory. Honorable Speaker, I also want to reiterate, this is the first time I'm seeing debt being managed in this country. We have been here many years and debt has been taken. Money has been borrowed. But just like the analogy that was used by Honorable Wamushomba about the member for Wundanyi, that he said that he would like at least to have 1 kilometer of road. I want to report to you, my relatives actually come from that side, and I can tell you there is now more than 1 kilometer of tarmac in Wundanyi constituency, Honorable Speaker. And that is what is about debt management. Debt management, Honorable Speaker, is about using the debt to develop the country in all places. For me, that is what managing debt is about. It is not about the things that we hear from people here who bring their professors' lecture notes to this assembly, pseudo-economists who come here and lecture us. The same things they have been saying from 2022 to now are the same things that they say here, they say in radio stations, they say in lecture rooms, they say in tea parties, they say in birthday parties, they say in weddings, Honorable Speaker. The same speech, Honorable Speaker, if you check the Hansard, it is just the same thoughts, same ideas, same everything. I am afraid that probably somebody went and crammed lecture notes and comes to this parliament, regurgitates them, goes to the next place, says the same thing. Honorable Speaker, we had the issue of the IPO for the pipeline, Honorable Speaker. Somehow, whatever they used to predict here has not happened. Actually, it has been oversubscribed heavily, Honorable Speaker. And I am afraid even when the Safaricom e-share comes to this speaker, this House, Honorable Speaker, without anticipating debate, Honorable Speaker, probably it will also go the same way. They say, it is cheaper. Then they change, say, it has been undervalued. They say, it is very expensive. Honorable Speaker, we want to tell these guys that are bitter off because they have lost a position in this parliament. There is time, take time to grow. If you graduated with a master's degree yesterday, it doesn't mean you actually have the experience to be able to give lectures and to talk to people about economics.